At exactly 2:11 a.m., the Turner plantation went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not sleeping quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when something inside a place dies, and the walls know it before the people do. A summer storm had passed an hour earlier, leaving the air thick and sour. Candles still burned in a few upstairs rooms, their flames bent low, gasping. Somewhere in the main house, a grandfather clock stalled mid-tick, its pendulum frozen like it had seen something it could not unsee. By sunrise, 7 bodies would be discovered. The Turner family, wealthy, God-fearing, respected, were found where they had fallen. One slumped beside the dinner table, another curled in a hallway, fingernails torn bloody against the floorboards. The youngest child was found in bed, eyes open, mouth blackened, as if screaming had come too late. There were no signs of struggle, no forced doors, no weapons, no intruder, just a bitter smell lingering in the air. Like burned herbs, like rot, and one woman was missing. Her name was Abigail Turner. She was not listed in the family Bible, not carved into the headstones, not mourned in the church sermon that followed. She was property, born enslaved on the same land where the family now lay dead. Abigail had lived her entire life inside the Turner house, feeding it, cleaning it, memorizing its sounds. She knew which floorboard cried at night, which door never shut fully, which prayers were lies. When the coroner came, he wrote, "Unknown poisoning," and closed his book. When the preacher spoke, he blamed Satan. When the town whispered, they said one thing over and over again. She was quiet, too quiet. But what no one ever asked, what no one wanted to ask, was why the house had been silent before the bodies were found, why the dogs refused to enter, why the well water had turned dark, and why, in the days that followed, people swore they could still hear footsteps moving through the Turner house. Slowly, carefully, as if someone was finishing what they had started. This was not a crime of rage. It was something older, something patient, and the truth of what Abigail Turner did, and what was done to her, was buried on purpose. Because some histories are not forgotten. They are sealed. Abigail Turner was born in 1819 in a room that did not belong to her mother. The room was behind the kitchen. Low ceiling. One small window nailed shut. The walls were stained dark from years of smoke and breath. This was where enslaved women labored when the house decided it needed another body. No doctor came. Only the mistress of the house stood in the doorway, counting breaths like inventory. Abigail's first cry was said to be thin, weak, almost swallowed by the walls. And from the beginning, the house learned her sound. She grew up inside the Turner plantation the way mold grows inside wood. Quiet, unnoticed, but impossible to remove once it takes hold. While other children ran the fields, Abigail stayed close to the main house. She scrubbed floors until her fingers split. She washed blood from sheets after nights no one spoke about. She learned how to move without being seen. People later said she was simple, but that was a lie they told themselves. Abigail watched everything. She watched Mistress Turner pray every morning, then beat a girl for spilling milk. She watched Master Turner preach scripture at dinner, then disappear into the slave quarters after dark. She watched the children learn kindness in daylight and cruelty by candlelight. And the house absorbed it all. Pain does not vanish. It sinks. By the time Abigail was 12, she no longer flinched at screaming. By 16, she knew which plants healed and which ones silenced. Old women taught her quietly, passing knowledge the way others passed lullabies. Roots for sleep, leaves for fever, seeds that stopped the heart without leaving a mark. They told her never to use them, but they also told her why they existed. Abigail began to feel something strange in the Turner house as she grew older. A pressure, like the walls leaned inward at night, like the air remembered things. Sometimes she woke with dirt under her nails, though she had not touched the ground. She started hearing whispers near the well. Not voices, not words, more like memories trying to speak. When her mother died, worked to death and buried without a name, Abigail did not cry. She stood very still, listening. That night, the house creaked for hours. The wind howled even though the trees did not move. Something had been added to the walls. Something heavy. From that moment on, Abigail stopped seeing herself as a person. She saw herself as a container. A place where everything the house refused to confess could be stored. And one day, when the weight became too much, she knew the house would have to give it back, whether it wanted to or not. The Turner family liked to say their house was blessed. They said it at church. They said it at dinner. They said it whenever something went wrong and they needed to believe it wasn't their fault. But houses don't care what people say about them. This one had been standing for nearly 70 years by the time Abigail was grown. Built from oak cut by enslaved hands. Mortared with lime burned in pits where men collapsed from heat and never stood back up. Every beam had absorbed sweat, blood, breath. A house like that listens. Religion ruled the Turner household, but it was not gentle religion. It was strict, cold. Scripture was used like a blade, clean, sharp, and meant to cut obedience into flesh. Every Sunday, the family gathered in the parlor while Abigail stood against the wall, invisible, holding a Bible she was forbidden to read. The prayers never mentioned mercy, only order. Master Turner believed God had placed him exactly where he belonged, above others, unquestioned. When he spoke, the house seemed to lean toward him, as if trained. When he was angry, the walls groaned. When he was pleased, the lamps burned brighter. Abigail noticed these things. She noticed how the house reacted to cruelty like a body reacting to pain, slow at first, then constant. She noticed how certain rooms always felt colder, no matter the season. How the air in the cellar pressed against her chest like a hand. That cellar was where the family kept their secrets. Old trunks, ledgers, chains no longer used, but never thrown away. The smell down there was wrong. Sweet and sour at the same time. Abigail was sent to clean it only once, and afterward she vomited until there was nothing left inside her. That night, she dreamed of hands inside the walls. Not reaching out, holding something in. As the years passed, Abigail began to understand that the Turners did not worship God alone. They worshiped the structure that protected them, the house, the land, the system that fed them. God was just the voice they gave it, and the house demanded balance. It demanded silence. Whenever something terrible happened, whippings, disappearances, children sold away, the house seemed to grow heavier. The floors sagged a little more. Doors stuck. Windows cracked without storms. Abigail began leaving small offerings in forgotten corners. Dirt, hair, ash. Not prayers, acknowledgments. She wasn't asking for help. She was listening. And slowly, the house began to respond. Not with kindness, with memory. Plantations kept records. Births, sales. That mattered. But the most important things were never written. They lived in glances that lasted too long. In doors locked from the outside. In the way certain names were never spoken again. Abigail learned this early. She learned at the year 3 enslaved men were taken into the woods behind the property and only 2 came back. No explanation. No punishment recorded. The family said it was illness. The church accepted it. The house did not. That night, Abigail heard dragging sounds beneath the floor. Slow, heavy, patient. She pressed her ear to the boards and felt vibration, like something breathing under her. From then on, she began to notice patterns. Every time the Turners did something unspeakable, something small broke. A dish shattered on its own. A mirror cracked. A child woke screaming from a dream they could not explain. The family called it coincidence. Abigail called it accounting. She began to understand that the house was keeping score. In the kitchen, the older women whispered to her while they worked. They spoke of things passed down through blood, not books. Of spirits that linger where pain is repeated. Of places that remember more than people ever will. They warned her. Don't listen too closely, one said. Some truths don't want mouths, said another. But Abigail had already started listening. She listened to the well at night, where voices echoed even when no one spoke. She listened to the walls, which popped and sighed like tired lungs. She listened to the floor beneath the master's bedroom, where crying sometimes leaked through the wood long after everyone claimed to be asleep. Her body began to change. She slept less, ate little. Her eyes grew dark, sunken, like she was always waking from a nightmare. Sometimes she stood still for long stretches, staring at nothing, until someone shouted her name, and she startled like she had been somewhere else. Once, Mistress Turner accused her of stealing silver. Abigail did not deny it. She simply said, "The house already has it." Mistress Turner slapped her hard enough to split her lip. That night, the mistress fell down the stairs. No one saw how. The steps had been solid for decades. Abigail cleaned the blood in silence. And the house creaked, slowly, approvingly. Abigail learned about poison the same way she learned everything else. Quietly, patiently, without permission. There was an old woman on the edge of the property everyone avoided. Her name was Ruth, though no one remembered if that was the name she was born with. She walked bent like a question mark, fingers stained dark from plants she touched daily. The Turners called her useless, dangerous. They let her live because forgetting her was easier than killing her. Ruth knew the land. Not the way the owners did, with maps and fences, but the way the dirt knows footsteps. She knew which roots healed and which ones whispered, which berries tasted sweet for a moment and then stole your breath. Abigail was sent to bring her scraps once a week. At first, Ruth said nothing. She just stared at Abigail like she was counting something behind her eyes. One evening, as cicadas screamed and the air felt too thick to breathe, Ruth finally spoke. "You hear it too," she said. Abigail froze. "Hear what?" she asked. "The place," Ruth replied. "The way it won't sleep." From that day on, Ruth began teaching her, not openly, but through work. She showed Abigail how to dry leaves without killing their strength, how to grind seeds so fine they vanished into food, how to brew something that looked like tea but carried silence inside it. "This isn't hate," Ruth warned. "Hate burns fast. This is memory." Abigail never asked what she meant. She already knew. The first ingredient was easy. It came from a flowering plant that grew near the well, where the water tasted faintly bitter if you drank too deep. The enslaved avoided it. Animals refused it. The Turners never noticed it at all. Abigail harvested it at night. As she worked, she felt watched, not by eyes, but by walls. The house seemed closer somehow, like it was leaning out across the land. The air hummed softly, low and steady, like a held breath. When she brought the dried leaves into the kitchen weeks later, nothing happened. No thunder, no voice, just a feeling of rightness. She mixed a small amount into broth meant for no one, poured it into the dirt behind the house, waited. By morning, the soil was dark and damp, as if something beneath had swallowed it eagerly. That was when Abigail understood. The poison was not for revenge. It was an offering, and the house was hungry. After the offering, the house changed, not in ways anyone else noticed. The Turner family still ate, still prayed, still laughed at the table like nothing in the world could ever reach them. The church bells still rang on Sundays. The fields still produced cotton stained faintly pink by cut hands. But inside the walls, something had shifted. Abigail felt it first. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt alert. When she walked the halls at night, the floorboards no longer groaned beneath her feet. They softened, like they were learning her step. Doors that once stuck opened easily for her, while slamming shut for others. Candles burned longer when she held them, their flames steady, calm. She began to dream differently. No more screaming, no more running. Instead, she dreamed of standing inside the walls themselves, of being stretched thin through wood and stone. She felt every footstep, every lie spoken aloud, every secret swallowed instead of confessed. In one dream, the house spoke, not in words, but in images. A ledger with names crossed out, a cellar door closing, a child's shoe buried behind the barn. Abigail woke with dirt under her nails again. This time, she didn't wash it off. She began to notice how often the family grew careless, how Master Turner drank more at night, how Mistress Turner complained of headaches that no remedy touched, how the youngest son refused to sleep alone, saying the walls whispered when the candles went out. They blamed the heat. They blamed bad dreams. They never blamed the house. Abigail prepared more mixtures, always small, always subtle, nothing that killed, only things that weakened, slowed, softened the body's grip on itself. She slipped them into waste food, into leftovers no one would miss. Each time, the house seemed to respond. The well water darkened slightly. The air grew cooler in the cellar. Cracks spread through the parlor's ceiling like veins. Ruth watched all of this from a distance. One night, she stopped Abigail by the path and gripped her wrist hard. "You've started something that doesn't stop," she said. Abigail met her eyes. "It already started before me." Ruth let go. She didn't argue, because she could feel it too, the slow turning of something ancient, like a wheel that had been stuck for generations finally beginning to move. The house was no longer just remembering. It was preparing, and it was preparing through Abigail. Sunday dinner at the Turner house was a ritual, not a meal. Everyone sat where they had always sat. Every plate was placed the same way. Every prayer spoken in the same flat voice, like repetition alone could keep the world in order. Abigail served quietly. She always did. But this Sunday, the air felt wrong. Thick, pressed down. Even the flies stayed away from the table, clinging to the windows as if they knew better. The family talked about church, about how the sermon had been strong, about obedience, about knowing one's place. Abigail lowered her eyes and listened. She carried out the soup first. Chicken broth. Simple, warm, nothing strange about it. The ingredients were ordinary. The poison was not. It had taken weeks to prepare. Dried carefully, ground until it looked like dust. Tasteless, colorless. It didn't burn, didn't sting. It waited. As each bowl was set down, the house creaked once. Not loud. Satisfied. They ate. At first, nothing happened. Mistress Turner complained about the heat. Master Turner wiped sweat from his brow. One of the daughters laughed too loudly, then stopped suddenly, like she'd forgotten how. Abigail stood against the wall, hands folded, heart steady. She wasn't angry. That was the strangest part. She felt empty, hollowed out, like the house was using her body as a doorway. Minutes passed. Master Turner's hand began to shake. He dropped his spoon. When he bent to retrieve it, his face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a wet sound came out. Mistress Turner clutched her chest. The youngest child started crying, not loud, but thin, panicked, like an animal caught in a trap. They looked at Abigail, not accusing, confused, as if they were seeing her for the first time. The house exhaled, not all at once. Slowly, one by one, the Turner family began to fall, not dead yet, but slipping. Their bodies betrayed them gently, almost kindly, like being guided down into sleep. Abigail did not move. She did not smile. She did not run. She stayed until the last bowl tipped over and spilled onto the floor. The soup soaked into the wood, and the house drank with it. Night did not fall all at once. It crept. The sun sank behind the fields, but the Turner house stayed dim, like it refused the dark. Lamps were lit and relit. Candles burned down to stubs. Still, no one slept. The poison worked the way Ruth said it would. Slow, gentle, certain. Master Turner collapsed first. Not dramatically, just a soft sound, like a sack of grain dropped on the floor. His eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling as if he were counting cracks he had never noticed before. Mistress Turner lasted longer. She paced the hallway, clutching her chest, whispering prayers that tangled together and made no sense. At one point she grabbed Abigail's arm, nails digging in. Do something, she begged. Abigail looked at her, and for the first time in her life, she said nothing at all. The children cried until their voices failed. Then they lay very still, breathing shallow, eyes glassy. One of them laughed once, a short, broken sound, then went silent. The house changed as the night dragged on. The walls popped and shifted like bones settling. The clock in the hallway stopped again, frozen at 2:11 a.m. exactly where it would be found in the morning. A low hum filled the air, barely audible, like something deep beneath the ground had started to sing. Abigail walked through the rooms. She did not hurry. She touched the walls as she passed, fingertips brushing the wood. It felt warm, alive. She could feel everything moving inside it. The fear, the confusion, the realization coming too late. She stopped in the cellar. The door was already open. Inside, the air was thick and damp. The shadows felt crowded. Abigail stepped down the stairs slowly, candle in hand. The flame did not flicker. She placed the candle on the dirt floor and whispered, not words, just breath. The cellar answered. A pressure lifted. A weight released. Somewhere above her, a body stopped breathing. By dawn, the Turner house was silent again. Not empty. Satisfied. And Abigail Turner was gone. The sun rose like nothing was wrong. Birds sang. The fields moved gently in the breeze. Smoke drifted from nearby chimneys where breakfast was already cooking. It was a neighbor who noticed first. The Turner house had always been loud in the mornings. Children shouting, doors slamming, bells ringing for servants. That morning, it made no sound at all. Even the dogs that usually barked from the yard sat rigid, ears back, refusing to step closer. By mid-morning, the church deacon came to check. He knocked. No answer. He tried the door. It opened easily. The smell hit him first. Not rot. Not blood. Something bitter. Burnt. Herbal. Inside, the house felt wrong. Too still. Like it was holding its breath. He found Master Turner in the dining room. Eyes open. Face gray. One hand stretched toward an overturned chair. Upstairs, he found the rest. bodies placed by chance, yet somehow orderly, like they had been laid out by an unseen hand. 7 in total. No wounds. No blood. No sign of violence. And no Abigail. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. Every dish washed. Every surface wiped clean. The fire cold, ashes neatly arranged. It looked like someone had prepared the house to be left alone for a very long time. The cellar door stood open. No one went down there. The sheriff arrived before noon. He walked the rooms, sweating despite the cool air. He refused to look too long at any one place. He wrote, "Suspected poisoning," and shut his notebook hard, like that could close the story. The church held a special prayer that night. They spoke of tragedy, of God's mysterious will, of evil slipping into places it didn't belong. No one said Abigail's name, but people noticed things. They noticed the well water had turned dark. They noticed cracks spreading across the plantation house like veins. They noticed how the walls made sounds at night, even with no wind. And some swore they saw a woman standing at the edge of the fields after sunset. Not running, not hiding, just watching. The town decided quickly. Abigail Turner had poisoned the family. They did not ask why. They did not ask how. They were far more afraid of what they might learn if they did. By the next morning, the town wanted closure. Not truth, closure. Men with rifles searched the woods behind the plantation. They followed the creek. They circled the old slave quarters, now quiet and half-abandoned. Dogs were brought in, but they whined and pulled against their leashes, refusing to track past the edge of the property. The sheriff called it superstition, but he didn't step past the gate either. They found no footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle. It was as if Abigail Turner had stepped out of the world instead of running through it. They checked the well. The water was blacker than before, smelling faintly of iron and rot. One man leaned too far over the edge and vomited. The sheriff ordered it sealed without explanation. They questioned the enslaved workers. Most said nothing. Some cried. A few stared at the floor like they were listening to something under it. Ruth was questioned last. She sat calmly on her stool, hands folded, eyes sharp. She didn't run, Ruth said. Then where is she? The sheriff demanded. Ruth tilted her head. Where she was always going. That answer was written down and then crossed out. The Turners were buried quickly. The church insisted. 7 coffins. 7 sermons that said very little. The preacher's voice shook when he spoke of the house, and he refused to step inside it again. After the burial, something strange happened. The Turner plantation began to fail. Crops withered in rich soil. Tools rusted overnight. Animals refused to graze near the house. Anyone who tried to sleep there woke screaming before dawn, claiming the walls leaned closer each night. Within a year, the property was abandoned. The house stood empty, but it was not quiet. Travelers avoided it. Children dared each other to touch its porch steps, and then ran, sobbing. Some claimed they saw lights moving inside. Others heard footsteps pacing slowly, methodically, like someone counting time. The town stopped speaking about Abigail Turner, but they never forgot her. Because forgetting didn't make the house stop watching. Years passed, but the Turner house did not age the way other places did. Paint peeled, yes. Wood warped. The roof sagged like a tired spine. But beneath the rot, the structure stayed stubborn, refusing to collapse, refusing to be reclaimed by the land. 3 different families tried to buy it. The first left within a week. They said the house felt crowded at night, like too many people standing just out of sight. Their youngest child began sleepwalking, stopping in the hallway at exactly 2:11 a.m., staring at the wall until someone shook him awake. The second family stayed longer. They tried to fix the place, replace boards, open windows that hadn't moved in decades. But every repair failed. New would split overnight. Fresh nails rusted. One man swore he heard whispering inside the walls while hammering, slow, careful, like counting. He fell from the stairs 2 days later. The third owner never even moved in. He spent one night alone in the house and came out at dawn pale and shaking. He refused to say what he saw, only that the house was already full. No one tried again after that. The plantation land was broken up and sold, but the house itself was left alone, standing at the center like a warning no one could remove. Ivy crept up the walls, but never crossed the windows. Birds nested everywhere except the roof. And always, the same details returned. The stopped clock. The cellar door that never stayed shut. The smell, faint, bitter, herbal, strongest on warm nights. Old people in the town told children not to play near it. Some places remember too much, they said. But memory does not stay quiet. By the late 1800s, stories about the Turner house had begun to change. Abigail Turner was no longer just a murderer. She became something else in the telling. A spirit, a warning, a shape seen in windows when no one was inside. And in every version of the story, one thing stayed the same. The house did not release her. It kept her. Or maybe she kept it. The church could not allow a story like this to live too long. Not in whispers. Not in half-remembered fear. Not in a house that stood like an accusation. So they tried to cleanse it. In 1891, a new preacher arrived in town. Younger, confident, certain that faith, spoken loudly enough, could drown out memory. He announced that the Turner house would be reclaimed for God. People warned him. He smiled and said fear was a sin. On a Sunday afternoon, he led a small group to the house. They carried Bibles, crosses, and hymn books. They sang as they stepped inside, voices echoing too long in the empty rooms. The house listened. They prayed in the parlor. The words felt thin, brittle, like they didn't belong there. When the preacher raised his voice, the floor creaked beneath him, slow and deep, like a warning. They moved to the cellar. The door resisted. It always did. When it finally opened, the smell rolled out. Damp earth, old wood, something bitter underneath. One woman began to cry without knowing why. A man dropped his Bible and refused to pick it up. The preacher descended alone. The others waited. Minutes passed. Then they heard him speaking, not praying, answering. His voice came up through the floor, low and strained, as if he were talking to someone very close. Then it stopped. They found him at the bottom of the stairs, alive but broken. His eyes were open, staring, but he did not seem to see anyone. He never spoke again. That night, the church burned its old records. Ledgers vanished. Names disappeared. The Turner Plantation was removed from official history, reduced to a footnote about economic decline. Abigail Turner's name was never written down. But erasing ink does not erase walls. After that, no one tried to cleanse the house again. They learned the truth too late. Some places do not want forgiveness. They want acknowledgement. By the early 1900s, the Turner house had become a thing people spoke around, not about. They used gestures instead of names. They lowered their voices without knowing why. They crossed the street when they passed the old road leading to it. But the house kept working. It kept the things no one would carry. Hunters reported strange echoes when they passed near the property, footsteps matching their own, but delayed, like a reply. Children claimed they heard humming on warm nights, low and steady, coming from the direction of the cellar. Not sad, not angry, focused, like someone concentrating. In 1907, a storm split an old oak near the house. When it fell, the roots tore up part of the ground beside the foundation. What was uncovered was quickly buried again, but not before a few people saw enough to understand why the earth had never settled there. Shoes, small bones, scraps of cloth pressed flat by time. No one reported it. They shoveled dirt back fast, hands shaking, as if the ground might pull them in if they took too long. That night, the house was louder than it had been in years. Not violent, not raging, just awake. Floorboards creaked in careful patterns. Windows tapped softly, one by one, like fingers counting. People dreamed of rooms they had never entered, of doors that opened inward, of a woman standing very still, listening. Abigail Turner no longer appeared as a figure running or hiding. She appeared as part of the house itself. A presence, a pressure, something that made you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breath, your own guilt. And always, the same feeling followed. Not fear, judgment. The house was not hunting. It was holding every lie spoken inside it, every prayer used as a shield, every silence that had cost someone their life. And it was waiting for someone foolish enough to ask it to speak again. In 1932, a man named Charles Whitmore came to town with a notebook and too much confidence. He was a schoolteacher from the city, educated, curious, the kind of man who believed every story had a rational ending if you looked hard enough. He had heard rumors of the Turner house and decided it was the perfect subject for an article about Southern superstition. He rented a room nearby and asked questions no one wanted to answer. People warned him. They told him the house was unsafe, unstable, cursed. He laughed gently and wrote those words down like they were jokes. "The past can't hurt us," he said. That was his mistake. Whitmore entered the Turner house alone one afternoon. He brought a lantern, a camera, and his notebook. He noted the architecture, the warped stairs, the stop clock, still frozen at 2:11. He stayed after dark. Neighbors saw a light moving inside long after sunset. Slow, careful, room to room, as if someone was showing him things. He did not leave. They found him the next morning sitting at the dining table. Alive, but changed. His notebook lay open in front of him. Every page was filled, not with writing, but with repeated lines pressed so hard they tore the paper. We remember. We remember. We remember. Whitmore never finished his article. He returned to the city, quit teaching, and spent the rest of his life collecting plantation records, burial maps, and church ledgers. He wrote letters to historical societies that were never answered. In his final years, he claimed the house had shown him everything. Not visions. Records. Not ghosts. Storage. He said Abigail Turner did not escape justice. She became it. When Whitmore died, his papers vanished. But the Turner house remained. Still standing. Still listening. After Whitmore, the house went quiet again. Not asleep. Not abandoned. Waiting. Decades passed. Cars replaced horses on nearby roads. Radios carried voices from far away. The world moved forward, dragging its noise with it. But the Turner house stayed fixed in place, like a thought no one could finish. Weeds swallowed the yard. Trees leaned in close, their branches scratching the walls at night. Still, the house did not fall. Storms tore roofs from newer buildings, but this one only groaned and held. People said it was stubborn. They were wrong. It was disciplined. In the 1940s, teenagers dared each other to sneak inside. Most ran back out within minutes, laughing too hard, pretending nothing scared them. But a few stayed longer. Those were the ones who stopped talking afterward. They described the same thing in different words. A feeling of being seen from the inside. Like the house wasn't watching them, but remembering them. Matching their faces to something already stored. One boy claimed the walls showed him scenes when he touched them. Not moving images. Impressions. Pain pressed flat by time. He said he felt hands on his wrists that weren't there. He said the house didn't want to hurt him. It wanted him to know. He moved away the next week. By then, the Turner house had stopped being just a place. It had become a boundary. People felt it when they crossed nearby land. A pressure in the chest, a tightness behind the eyes, like walking into a room where an argument had just ended. And beneath it all, Abigail Turner remained. Not as a face, not as a voice, as function. She was the hand that sorted, the mind that remembered, the silence that refused to forget. The house had learned patience from her. It no longer needed to act. History, after all, had a way of repeating itself. And when it did, the house would be ready. In 1947, the county decided to modernize. Old records were being moved from the courthouse basement. Ledgers, deeds, church notes, slave inventories written in fading ink. Paper so old it felt like skin when touched. Most of it was considered useless. Too painful. Too outdated. They loaded the boxes onto a truck. And for reasons no one could explain later, they parked it overnight beside the Turner house. Just for one night. It rained. Not hard. Not dramatic. A slow, soaking rain that smelled like rust. Sometime after midnight, nearby residents reported seeing lights inside the Turner house again. Not random this time. Purposeful. Room to room. Down the stairs. Into the cellar. At 2:11 a.m., the rain stopped. In the morning, the truck was still there. The boxes were not. They found them scattered inside the house. Every ledger opened. Every page exposed. And every name connected to the Turner plantation, owners, overseers, preachers, was marked. Not crossed out. Pressed through. As if something heavy had leaned on the ink until it bled into the paper. Abigail Turner's name appeared for the first time. Written dozens of times. In handwriting no one recognized. The county sealed the house 2 days later. Boarded it up. Posted warnings. Officially declared it unsafe and condemned. But the damage was done. Copies of those records circulated quietly. Passed hand to hand. Read in private. People began to understand that the house had not created anything new. It had only returned what was taken. And it had done so without mercy. After the records incident, people stopped pretending the Turner house was just old wood and rot. They began speaking carefully. Not about ghosts. Not about curses. About containment. Those who studied the copied pages noticed something strange. The handwriting that marked the names was consistent, measured, calm. It never shook, never rushed. It looked less like anger and more like duty, like someone doing a job they had practiced for a very long time. People began to dream again. Not everyone, only those who had read the names. They dreamed of standing inside narrow spaces, of being pressed between walls that breathed slowly, of hearing a woman's presence without hearing her voice. She did not threaten. She did not comfort. She observed. Some dreamers woke with scratches on their palms, as if they had been holding onto rough wood. Others woke knowing things they had never learned, family histories, old lies, debts buried by time. One man dreamed of Abigail Turner for 7 nights in a row. He never saw her face, only her hands, always working, sorting papers, cleaning blood, pressing names into place. On the 8th day, he burned his family Bible and buried the ashes behind his house. He said it felt necessary. He said the house had not asked him to do it. It had waited for him to understand. By the late 1940s, no one went near the Turner house anymore, not even at a distance. Roads shifted. Paths changed. The land itself seemed to bend away from it. The house no longer needed witnesses. It had become a record, a living archive of what had been denied. And inside it, inside the walls, the floors, the cellar dirt, Abigail Turner remained. Not trapped, not wandering, working. In 1951, someone tried to end it the old way. Fire. No announcement. No prayers. No witnesses. Just gasoline poured along the porch and a match struck at dusk. The flames caught fast. Wood that had stood for more than a century lit up like dry paper. Neighbors saw the glow from miles away and felt, for a moment, a strange relief, like a held breath finally released. But the fire did not behave. It burned up, not in. The roof collapsed quickly, but the walls stayed standing far longer than they should have. Windows blackened, but did not shatter. The cellar door did not burn at all. And then, just after 2:11 a.m., the fire went out. Not slowly, instantly, as if someone had closed a hand around it. When the smoke cleared, the house was ruined, but not destroyed. The frame still stood. The foundation remained untouched. And inside the ashes, investigators found something that made them stop asking questions. The ledgers were there, unburned, pressed flat beneath fallen beams, pages intact, names still visible. No one ever claimed responsibility for the fire. But people noticed what changed afterward. The house stopped making noise. No footsteps, no whispers, no lights. It wasn't quiet the way a place is abandoned. It was quiet the way a task is finished. After the fire, the Turner house was finally left alone. Not because people weren't curious, because curiosity no longer felt safe. The ruins stood like bones picked clean by time. Charred beams jutted into the sky. Ash settled into the dirt and never fully washed away. Plants refused to grow where the foundation cut into the ground. Even weeds avoided it, bending their roots around the place as if respecting a boundary. Children born afterwards sensed it without being told. They didn't play there, didn't dare each other, didn't ask questions. They walked faster when they passed nearby. They held their breath without realizing why. The county tried once more to erase it, this time by neglect. No markers, no plaques, no mention in local histories. Maps slowly stopped labeling the land. The Turner name faded from public memory. But memory does not require permission. People still dreamed. Not often, not loudly, just enough. They dreamed of lists being completed, of hands smoothing paper, of a weight finally balanced. The dreams no longer carried fear. They carried a calm that felt earned, but not gentle. Those who dreamed woke with the same understanding. Nothing was chasing them. Nothing wanted them. They had simply brushed against something that had finished remembering them. The land around the ruins felt lighter now. Birds returned. The air moved more freely. It was as if something had been holding the ground down for generations and had finally let go. But the center, the exact place where the cellar once stood, remained untouched, unclaimed, waiting, not for revenge, for recognition. Because what Abigail Turner became was not a ghost. She became a function history tried to avoid. And history does not forget its tools. There is no grave for Abigail Turner, no marker, no date of death. She does not rest in soil or stone. She rests in structure, in what was built to hide her and failed. The Turner family vanished from power in a single night, but Abigail did not vanish at all. She moved into the only place that could hold what she carried. A place made of memory, silence, and stolen breath. The house did not claim her. She claimed it, not out of anger, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. Someone had to remember. Someone had to hold the weight of what could not be spoken in churches or written in ledgers without bleeding through the page. Someone had to become the boundary between forgetting and truth. So she stayed, not as a woman walking halls, but as pressure in the walls, as time stopping at 211, as names that refused to stay buried. Today, the land where the Turner house stood looks ordinary if you don't know where to look. Grass grows nearby. Roads pass without slowing. Life continues, loud and confident. But if you stand in the right place, right over where the cellar once opened, and stay very still, you may feel it. A pause, a listening, not judgment, expectation. Because the story of Abigail Turner was never about poison. It was about containment. And some containers, once filled, are never meant to be emptied. They are meant to remain, watching, remembering, so the rest of us don't have to pretend we didn't know.